So my story today comes from a coworker of mine. He's our HR guy. I told him that I would tell everyone that he's the best HR guy we've ever had. His name is Victor.
HR people are either the best or the worst.
He's dope. So he started listening to our podcast a month or so ago.
Shout out Victor.
What's up, dude?
Listened to the Dugway sheep incident. And he's like, bro, I got to tell you about a story that my friend has out in that area of Utah. Ooh. And I was like, oh, yeah, share it. He's like, I can't remember exactly. I'm going to have my friend send it to me.
Dude, real quick, somebody commented about how they were on a military base there, assigned there for a little bit, and he said the weirdest things would happen while he was there.
Bro, apparently in Dugway, that military base is like a beacon for UFO and paranormal activity. Wild.
So it should be Storm Dugway.
Storm Dugway. Yeah, where are we going to Area 51 for? So his friend sent him the story, and he shared it with me. And so this last weekend, I decided to take a little drive into the West Desert to just get a little more acquainted with the area before I tell my story.
Sounds like I had to go check on my dump sites out there.
Make sure no one was seeing stuff. JK, I'm innocent. I never did anything bad. So this last Saturday, I went down to Dugway all the way to the military base and drove around those mountain and desert area, riding around there. Mostly just because I wanted to kind of get a feel for the West Desert, because honestly, we don't go out there very much. Usually we go east because it's much prettier.
Yeah, so what's it like over there?
So it's basically just like arid desert. So you got like the mountains and then lots of like shrubbery, bushes, some trees every once in a while.
Actual trees?
Every once in a while.
High desert, yeah.
Yeah. And in the words of MJ, not cute. So, with that being said, after seeing it for myself, getting a little bit better idea of this story, I wanted to share it with you.
Cool.
So, this story comes from Victor's friend, whose name is Dan. Now, they have this program where they'll take underprivileged and like rehabbing kids out into the desert to camp and like just basically provide and survive on their own with these counselors to rehabilitate or whatever, right? So his friend Dan, and it sounds like from the story that Dan is the head counselor in this group. There are about 4 other counselors, so I think 5 total. And they're out south of Dugway in this desert. And they're on one of their hiking and camping expeditions because they have like their home base, and they'll take the kids out on these hiking expeditions, and they'll go way out there because there's a bunch of different groups of these kids and they don't want to meet up. They want to be out by themselves on their own. And they are west of the Sheeprock mountain range. I had to look that up so I could go find it as well. So from their camp that they set up out in this desert area, they can see the mountains, and they see what looks like to be a cave. Now, they can't tell if it's a cave or if it's like a big tree that's casting a shadow onto the mountain. So they're like, one day, hey, let's just take the kids and go on a day hike from their little base there. So one day they take off on this hike, and they estimate to be about 2.5 miles away. Now, most of these kids, all of these kids don't really want to be there. And so they're complaining, making up excuses, not wanting to do stuff. But eventually, at about 4 o'clock, they end up taking off. 4 p.m., they start taking off on this hike. And it's about 2.5 miles away. So for me, I'm like, okay, that's going to be like 25 minutes. Mm-hmm. For them, they stop every 200 yards because the girls, and it was a group of girls that they were with, and then the counselors, they just didn't want to hike. And when they did get hiking, they were hiking really slow. So they start off on this hike, and they stop every 200 yards or so. So it's taking them really, really long time. Now, Dan, at one point during this hike, kind of gets this feeling of maybe we shouldn't go to this cave. He doesn't say anything, but then one of the other counselors comes up to him and says, hey, I don't know about going to this cave, actually.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, maybe it could be a mountain lion or like an animal living in this cave.
It's probably getting like dark as well.
Well, and it's still light out, and they anticipate to be able to make it back before the sun fully goes down, but they are going slow at this point, so they don't know. So he's like, okay, well, if we notice there's any like animal like footprints or anything, we'll just leave once we get there. So they continue. They keep hiking and stopping, and another one of the counselors comes up to him and says, and this is why I think he was the head counselor or whatever, they had a bad feeling about going to this campsite. And he said, well, at this point, we're almost there. We'll be good. And then the other counselor's like, okay, yeah, we'll be good. If there's like any animals, we'll just turn around if we see anything. So that's their plan. Now, they keep hiking and they get to another stop. And it's kind of random. In the middle of the desert, it's like this hard, packed down, like dirt, arid desert. But at one point on their stop, they're going across the desert. This is not a trail. They're blazing their own trail trying to find this cave. They come to this part where it's like this mound of red sand that's probably like 6 feet wide and like an anthill in the middle of it. So it's just like a regular anthill, but it's like just a place of note that they recognize that's not normal. So they see this and then they keep walking. Eventually, they get up to probably like the last half mile of this hike towards this cave or whatever, as far as they know. And it's starting to go uphill, steep and sandy and stuff like that. So they start to slow down even more. Eventually, they get to pretty much where the cave is, but it's up a 40-foot cliff. But they can definitely tell that it's a cave now. And there's also a big juniper tree outside of the cave. So, like, it was hiding the cave as well if they hadn't noticed it a little bit, thinking it could have been a tree and deciding to kind of go and see what it was anyways, probably wouldn't have noticed. So they realize they can't go straight up, but they can go up and around. So they decide they're going to go up and around towards this cave. And he's kind of like second guessing, like maybe we shouldn't do this, but then the girls start climbing up. And he's like, okay, now he has to go and catch the girls. And he's thinking like at the same time, if any of the girls go into the cave, we'll just like, we'll get them out as fast as we can and get out of there if it's anything like sketch.
Bro, this guy just ignoring all the warning signs.
Yeah. There's some red flags that came in the
just zero
form
backbone
of bad feelings.
Yeah.
From all of the counselors. So eventually they get up around this ledge, and behind the tree as they're getting to the cave opening, and they realize that this cave is actually big. It's like 30 feet wide, 20 feet up, and probably goes back 50-something feet, but they can't quite see into it yet.
Dang.
Now, strangely, when they get to the top, all of the girls just kind of lose interest. But they all just kind of go and sit on the ledge as they watch the sunset coming down over the other mountains. So it's like they lost interest in the cave to look at the sunset. However, all of the counselors were still like, okay, well, let's still check it out. So as the girls start sitting on the ledge to look at the sunset, and just before they go into the cave, he remembers hearing a bird call. He's like, he thought it was weird because it sounded like it wasn't a bird, but like a person making a bird call. And it sounded like it was coming up from above the cave. And then he heard 3 bird calls from down in the valley, almost as if they were returning the call. He thought it was weird, but they're already there. So they go into the cave, and he's the first one in. He makes it to the back, and they see like this pile of bones. It's kind of dark, but all of a sudden he's like, okay, this probably is an animal's cave. And as his eyes start adjusting, he notices that the bones are not chewed on or like broken, but sawn. So someone has sawed the bones and place them neatly in a pile. So as he realizes this, he kind of backs up and like hits his head a little bit on the rock, like a little rock outcropping. And as he does this, he also notices that there was a little shelf that was built into the cave wall, or like carved into the cave wall, little like kind of arm height. And he could tell that the shelf was the color of dark red, like blood color. And as his eyes continue to adjust, he notices that there are faces painted on the wall above this shelf. And it's like white faces with like dark eyes and toothless mouths. Just strange looking, scowling faces with like symbols around the faces as well.
Ew.
And as he kind of follows it, as he's looking at these, he sees like up on the ceiling, it looked like it had been like spray painted and then more faces painted on top of the ceiling. And this is probably like 20, 25 feet high. So he starts freaking out, and like the couple of counselors that got as far as he did in start freaking out and start backing up as well. As they get out of the cave, they're like starting to panic a little bit because they see these sawed-off bones, these paintings with the scowling faces and stuff like that. And
The whistles.
so they get out to this ledge, and they're like, "Girls, we're leaving." And the girls could sense like the urgency. They didn't ask any questions, but they just started to leave. Now, instead of going back down the way that they came, they decided to go straight across the mountain to another place where they could go down instead. And as they go straight across the mountain, and as the sunset is still going down over the other mountains, it catches the light on the cave, which also had two big black faces painted on the cave, just like looking in down in on it. So like on the outside of the cave, like looking down on the cave. At this point, he sees someone above the cave, crouching in some bushes. And it occurs to him that that was probably who made the bird call initially. So they, with urgency, start going across like the mountains and then start going down. Now they're trying to go as quickly as they can. It's starting to get dark because it's sunsetting.
The other counselors notice?
The other counselors notice because, as far as I know, all the counselors went into the cave.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it occurred to them that the bird calls were made by a human.
But this one counselor
did.
The girls are fine?
The girls so far are fine. They notice the urgency. They basically follow the orders to, we need to get out of here, but they aren't asking questions yet. So they start running, and like I said, this isn't a trail. They basically blaze their own trail.
Yeah.
Now he had like a GPS system with him where he had tagged the location of their campsite, so they knew how to get back. So that wasn't going to be an issue. But as they started running through the desert, they could hear this person running after them. And at one point he said he saw who it was, but it looked like they were dressed in like buckskin, just leather clothing, and was like hunching beneath the bushes so that it wouldn't be seen. As they continue running, they hear the sound, and this is the sound that they would call out with other counselors so that they knew where each other were. They hear the sound of a pig. That's the sound that they would do.
A pig?
Yeah.
Nope.
So they hear it in front of them, like ahead of them, and they're all of a sudden like, okay, someone else is showing up. And they're like, they start to calm down. They make the call back, and then nothing. And then they hear the footsteps coming around them at the same time, just following them. They continue running, and eventually they get back to the red pile of dirt that they noticed earlier. As they get to it, all of the girls are just standing around, like looking down at this pile of dirt. As he gets to it, he kind of goes through the girls and like, what are you guys looking at? And it's a pile of things on this red dirt pile. And he notices that this pile of things is from their campsite.
I knew it.
It's like some trash bags from his bag, a leather sheath from one of the other counselors' bag, a cooking kit from another counselor's bag, and he notices it's only the counselor's stuff. So A, they know who's in charge, where they sleep, and where their campsite is.
So like complete vulnerability.
Complete vulnerability.
Such odd, terrifying like behavior.
Now, they start freaking out. The girls start asking questions at this point, like, what's going on? Like, we just need to get back. We need to get back to the campsite. And they don't have a vehicle right now.
Everyone
either.
for themselves. Just start running.
Slit somebody's Achilles while everyone else runs.
Push the weak one over.
Yeah, as long as you can get faster than the other person. But they don't have a car right now either because they get dropped off.
Mm-hmm.
They know that the car's supposed to be showing or the truck's supposed to be showing up the next day. So really all they can do is make it back to the camp. And at that, now they know they're vulnerable there as well because of this pile of things just left out in the desert. So they continue to run. They finally make it back to their campsite. And he notes that this was one of the only time the girls just followed orders and did what they said. Because he's like, okay, we just need to move all of your tents around ours so that we're all together.
It's funny how when y'all scare for your life, you be listening to rules, huh?
So they clump all of their tents together so they're next to each other. And all the girls like get in their tents to go to sleep. But the counselors stay up and they kind of walk like 50 feet away so they can talk without being heard by the girls. And he said one of these counselors was like, I don't get it. Yes, we saw the paintings, we saw the cave, but we didn't take pictures. Nothing happened, so why are they still after us?
Huh.
As he says this, one of the other counselors was like, oh.
Fuck.
And she takes her bag and pulls out a couple of these bones. Because being out in the desert, you have to get used to using things whenever you can, like kill animals or
No excuse.
This is what she said.
That doesn't suffice. She says that. Well, in the desert, you have to get used to using things.
So she had these 3 bones with her in her bag. So he takes the bones and they can hear like people like around the camp, like running around still. So he takes them. They're probably about 100 yards off of the road. He goes to the road and down a little bit and yells out into the desert, but also kind of like a scared yell, like, here you go, guys.
Yeah.
Here are your bones, and just like lays them on the ground. And they leave. So they go back to camp. They're sitting around like their campfire as like all the tents are around them. And they're just trying to figure out what they saw at this point. And all of a sudden they hear the sound of an owl somewhere out in the desert. And it was this wonderful time that one of the counselors decided to tell them in Navajo culture, the sound of an owl means someone's going to die that night.
What a dickhead.
Yeah. So they're freaking out even more.
I'm glad these people are in charge of rehabilitating the youth.
They start freaking out more. They're basically, they can't do anything, but they hear like the sound of people walking around the camp or like running around the camp, like footsteps and like crunching of tumbleweed and stuff like that. And then eventually, and this was in their story, at 3 a.m., it started to rain. So they kind of put up a shelter over the tents to kind of protect it from the rain.
Please tell me there's a flash flood there in the desert.
But now they can't hear any of the people out there anymore. Fortunately as well, they couldn't hear the owl either, but they couldn't hear anyone running or walking around their camp, so they're almost more vulnerable now. They don't know where whoever it is at.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they wake up in the morning and they see footprints all around their camp. Some were feet, some were moccasins.
Like bare human feet?
Bare human feet. Moccasins, boots, all of those. And then eventually the other counselor who brings the car shows up. They tell the girls to pack everything up. And this is actually where he noted all the girls just did what they were told without asking or complaining. They get everything in the truck and they leave. And then he says, this was not the last time we would encounter this group out in the desert. But that's for another story.
Whoa.
I can't believe they just went back to the desert.
Yeah, the fact that homeboy returned, I'd quit, bro. I'd
So
move.
he did say one of the counselors quit when they got that.
Yeah.
He said that some of them went on leave.
I don't give a damn about these youth.
They also said they went back to the cave to show their leadership,
Mm-hmm.
and everything had been spray painted over. So nothing was there anymore. Like the bloody faces or anything like that. It had all been spray painted and graffitied. And the bones were gone, obviously.
Couple things. What if it's just the most elaborate rehabilitation program ever? It's like, we gonna scare these girls straight.
They were hoping the girls would go in the cave, and they didn't, but still worked out.
2, Jurassic Park, Lost World. Number 2, when homeboy steals the velociraptor eggs.
Oh, dude, that's number 3, bro.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Apologies. Apologies to my Jurassic Park anthology enthusiasts. And he like opens his camera bag and he has the
And he gives them to the velociraptors.
and he's so shamed, and then that guy's like, or Alan, just,
Yeah.
like writes him off. Anyway, that's what made me think, or it reminded me of that.
That's I thought about that too when I was reading. I was like, why?
Do you remember the Chilean dude who I used to tell scary stories with at the restaurant, and he was friends with the Navajo guys who told him the story about the skinwalker on the roof?
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
I once told him that I was going to go out into the East Desert to an abandoned mine
Mm-hmm.
and explore at night. And he got dead serious. And he's like, bro, don't go out there. I was like, why not? And he's like, people sacrifice animals and stuff out there all the time. And there's like satanic rituals out there all the time. He's like, I'm dead serious. Don't go out there. He was convinced I was going to die. And I was like, oh, whatever, bro, I'm going. You know? But it's just weird. This is not the first time I've heard of
Stuff going on in the West Desert.
in Utah. West, I apologize. I said East.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, and granted, I read this story and I was like, I got to go check it out.
Did you find a cave?
I didn't find any caves. I did find the mountains. I found the military base. Went to a couple like lookouts and I couldn't see anything, but that was it.
That's a really good story. I'll be 100% honest with you. It's so like almost elaborate or movie-esque. It's hard for me to believe. But if it really did happen, then that is terrifying.
It is terrifying if that's legit. And the thing is, Victor from work said he also worked with this rehabilitation for like a year or so, or like a summer. So he knew all these people personally and what they did. So he believed the story.
So he was like told by multiple people?
Yeah. He was like, this is terrifying.
Because that's just so wild to be caught out there.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but the whistling creeped me out the most. People communicating around you and you like don't really realize it. Don't like that.
Yeah.